king had 4 daughters who were not only beautiful, but also kind-hearted, noble, and compassionate. The king had 4 daughters who were not only beautiful, but also kind-hearted, noble, and compassionate. 3 of them were already married, but the youngest daughter, Nilafar, was more beautiful, intelligent, and noble than her sisters. Her hair was golden, but she wasn't married yet, because no prince had come along who was as handsome, charming, and wise. The king and queen loved their daughter dearly, and wished that she would marry a good. One day, while playing, the princess and her friends reached the river near the royal palace. When the friends saw that the water was shining like moonlight, they were all filled with the desire to bathe in it, and they persuaded the princess to join them. The princess agreed to her friend's request, and they all began bathing in the river. During this time, a few strands of the princess's hair fell into the river. They all returned to the palace. Meanwhile, the strands of the princess's hair floated down the river and ended up in the kingdom of another king, eventually coming to rest on a rock. By coincidence, the prince of that kingdom was out hunting in the forest nearby. One of his friends had gone to the river to drink water, and there he noticed the shining golden strands of hair and was immediately. He picked them up and brought them to the prince. The prince was astonished upon seeing those strands of hair and took them to his room. The queen offered him food, but the prince refused. He remained silent, but when he didn't even have breakfast or tea the next day, the queen grew worried. She told the king that the prince had been unusually quiet and hadn't eaten anything since returning from the hunt. The king summoned the vizier's son and said, The king said, "Find out the reason behind the prince's sadness." The vizier's son went to the prince and asked, "Why haven't you eaten anything since yesterday? Why are you so quiet?" At first, the prince tried to avoid answering, but when the vizier's son kept asking, the prince finally said, "I want the girl with the golden hair." The vizier's son replied, "Well, that's no ordinary." "All right then, I'll go and ask the king for permission," said the vizier's son. He went to the king and said, "Yesterday, while we were returning from the hunt and stopped by the river to drink water, we found these strands of golden hair. The prince wishes to marry the girl to whom this hair belongs." Upon hearing this, the king summoned the prince and said, "Eat your food. I order that the girl with the golden hair must be found," ordered the king. With this command, he sent the chief of police to immediately begin the search. The chief, upon receiving the order, dispatched soldiers to different regions, but even after a week, there was no trace of the girl with the golden hair. When the prince heard this, he fell ill. The king grew deeply worried about the prince's condition and made a royal announcement. Whoever finds the girl with the golden hair shall receive a great reward. Tempted by the reward, many people began searching for the girl, but no clue could be found, and the prince's health continued to worsen. Finally, the king said to the vizier, "If the girl with the golden hair is not found within a month, I will punish you." Hearing this, the vizier returned home and said, "Now my death is near," thought the vizier's son, "but I am sure I will be the one to find the girl with the golden hair." At last, he disguised himself as a Bengal seller and began walking along the riverside. Wherever he found a village, he would go in and shout, "Buy bangles, beautiful bangles." When the village girls heard his calls, they would come out. The vizier's son would look at each girl's hair carefully. 20 days passed like this, but he found no clue. He became worried, fearing that he would soon be executed. He hurried along his journey until, finally, he reached the city of Princess Nilafar. There too, he continued selling bangles, but still, he hadn't seen anyone with golden hair. The girl was never found, but whenever he sold bangles, he would ask every girl the same question. "In our land, there is a girl with golden hair. Is there such a girl in your land too?" The girls would shake their heads and say they didn't know anything about it. One day, when only a few days were left before the end of the month, The treasurer's daughter called the vizier's son to buy bangles. As he was putting the bangles on her wrist, he asked her the same question he always asked. In our land, there is a girl with golden hair. Is there anyone with golden hair in your land too? The girl replied that she knew Princess Nilafar and that her hair was golden. Hearing this, the vizier's son, he was very happy, but immediately said, "This is not right. The princess's hair might be golden, but it cannot be made of real gold. You are mistaken." The girl, now angry, replied, "I am not lying." The vizier's son responded, "Then what else could it be?" The girl became even angrier and said, "If I bring you a strand of the princess's golden hair, will you believe me?" The vizier's son quickly replied, "If you show me the princess's golden hair, I will give you these precious bangles for free. But if you're wrong, and her hair isn't truly golden, then you must marry me." The girl accepted the challenge. The vizier's son left. That evening, the girl went to the princess and, during their conversation, quietly plucked a strand of her hair. Then, taking permission from the princess, she returned home. The next day, as the vizier's son was passing by her house, while selling bangles, the girl called him over and placed the golden hair of the princess in front of him. "Do you believe me now?" she asked. The vizier's son smiled and said, "You were right. You win the bet. These bangles are now yours." The girl kept the bangles, and the vizier's son left immediately. He bought a horse and began his journey back to his homeland, as there were only 2 days left in the month, and his city was far away. He rode the horse day and night, but the city was very far away. Meanwhile, the month came to an end. The king called the vizier and asked, "Did you find the girl with golden hair?" The poor vizier replied, "My son himself has gone to search for her." The king grew angry and said, "The month is over, and the prince is gravely ill. There's no hope left for his survival, and you've done nothing. Therefore, today you will be executed." The poor vizier cried and pleaded with the king, but the king, in his rage, said, "This is impossible to stop now." By 4 o'clock in the evening, the entire crowd had gathered in a large open ground. The vizier was brought forward, his hands tied, and made to sit down. The king gave the executioner the order to behead the vizier. The executioner raised his sword, and just then, the voice of the vizier's son rang out, "Stop! Don't kill him, I have brought the golden hair."
The executioner immediately stopped, and the vizier's ropes were untied. The vizier's son approached the king and said, 200 miles from here is the city of Bijunagar. The youngest princess there, Princess Nilafar, has hair made of real gold. The prince was overjoyed upon hearing this and thanked the vizier's son. The vizier said to the king, "The prince is ready to travel. If God wills, he will return successful." The king gave orders for the journey to be prepared and sent a messenger ahead to inform the king of Bijunagar about their arrival. A few days later, the king, members of the royal court, the prince's friends, and the vizier's son all departed for Princess Nilafar's city, traveling at a comfortable pace. They reached the city on the 12th day, since the messenger had already informed the local king. They were welcomed with great celebration and given a place to rest. The next day, the king of Bijunagar asked Princess Nilafar, "Now, tell us your conditions." The princess replied, "Hold court today. I will ask the prince some questions." Then, the princess sat on a royal chair with her companions around her, and the prince stepped forward. Seated on a magnificent throne, the prince faced the royal court. The hall was filled with nobles and high-ranking officials. One of Princess Nilafar's companions greeted everyone with a formal bow, and then asked the prince, "You must now answer. A question from our wise princess. What does wisdom eat?" A silence fell over the court. The prince was confused and deeply troubled. He didn't understand the question, so he looked toward the vizier's son. The vizier's son made a subtle gesture with his eyes. Understanding the signal, the prince said, "Please tell your princess that this question is very difficult. I request one day to think about it." The companion returned to the princess and soon came back with a response. The prince has been granted one day to find the answer. Hearing this, the court was dismissed, and everyone returned to their homes. That night, the prince, the king, and their companions were resting in the guest chambers. The prince asked the vizier's son, "What answer shall I give?" The vizier's son was equally troubled. "Even I haven't found an answer yet," he admitted. All night, the vizier's son thought and thought, but no solution came to mind. Morning arrived, everyone had breakfast, and later rested again. Then came lunch. Still no answer. After tea, a summons was received. They were to return to the court. The king and his courtiers arrived at the court, but the prince, feeling sad, struggled to rise. The vizier's son was sitting in his room when the prince went to fetch him. The vizier's son's eyes were filled with tears. The prince, with great concern, asked, "Why are you so sad, vizier?" The vizier's son immediately ran to the prince, embracing him and smiling. The prince, puzzled, asked, "What made you happy all of a sudden?" The vizier's son whispered something into the prince's ear. Hearing this, the prince smiled and came out laughing. The king, noticing their smiles, asked, "You were so sad a moment ago, and now you're laughing. What's going on?" The prince whispered in the king's ear. Upon hearing this, the king smiled and laughed, and the whole court was filled with joy. The prince took his place on the throne, and one of Princess Nelifar's companions came forward and asked, "Prince, our wise princess wants to know, what does wisdom eat?" The prince smiled and replied, "Tell your wise princess that wisdom eats sorrow." As soon as the prince said this, the entire court erupted in applause. The entire court erupted in joy, chanting, "Long live the prince." Later, one of Princess Nelifar's companions approached the prince and asked, "O wise and courageous prince, our noble, cheerful, and wise princess wishes to know, what does wisdom drink?" Upon hearing this second question, the entire court of learned men and courtiers became uneasy. They all began murmuring, wondering about the answer to this difficult question. The prince, as usual, asked for one day to think, and the court was dismissed. This question was even more difficult than the first one, and everyone was growing more and more worried. Even the vizier's son seemed particularly troubled. As time passed, everyone offered different ideas, but none seemed correct. The day went by in a blur, and it was time to return to the court. As the royal procession made its way back, the king became increasingly angry. He muttered, "I told you not to go, but this stubborn prince insisted. Now we're all going to be embarrassed because of him." The king continued to grumble, his anger rising. "Can't you see that all of us are being made fools of, and soon will be humiliated in front of the entire court?" The prince, with great respect, leaned close to the king and whispered something in his ear. He then said aloud, "Your Majesty, I am laughing because I am amused by your anger." Upon hearing this, the king smiled, his anger subsiding. The vizier's son, who had been watching the prince closely, quietly whispered something to him. Whatever was said, the prince immediately burst into laughter. When they reached the court, one of Princess Nelifar's companions again approached the prince and asked, "O wise and noble prince, our clever princess asks, what does wisdom drink?" The prince smiled and, without hesitation, responded, "Oh, good companion of the wise princess, go and tell her that this is a very easy question. Wisdom drinks anger." As soon as he said this, the entire court burst into applause and cheers, shouting, "Bravo, bravo, well done." Soon, Princess Nilafar herself appeared, veiled, and walked up to the prince. She said, "You have answered both of my questions correctly. Now, what happens next?" The vizier's son, equally puzzled, replied, "I am not sure myself, but don't worry, I'll figure it out." The next day, the vizier's son disguised himself as the bangle seller again and arrived at the treasury. The girl, hearing his voice, immediately called him in. Upon his arrival, the treasury keeper's daughter said, "You're disguised as the bangle seller. You must be a companion of the prince. You had already tricked me by revealing the princess's whereabouts earlier. Tell me who you really are." The vizier's son smiled and replied, "O kind-hearted girl, I am the prince's friend, and the son of the vizier from the prince's land." The girl said, "So far, your friend, the prince, has been winning, but today he cannot win." Hearing this, the vizier's son began to cry. The girl, seeing him cry, asked, "Why are you crying, vizier's son?" With tears in his eyes, the vizier's son responded, "I want to marry you. And the prince had promised me that if he married the princess, he would ask the king here to arrange my marriage to you. But now that the prince will lose the challenge, his marriage to your princess will not happen. This means my marriage to you will also never happen. That's why I am crying." Upon hearing this, the girl was initially shy, but then said, "Don't cry. I will tell you how this lion can be freed from its cage." The vizier's son smiled through his tears and asked, "Tell me, how?" The treasury keeper's daughter explained, "In fact, the lion inside the cage is not a real lion. It's a wax lion, made to look exactly like a real one and painted with color. If a hot iron rod, heated on the fire, is moved into the lion's stomach, the wax will melt, and the lion will come out of the cage. This way, the princess's condition will be fulfilled, as the lion will be freed without opening the cage." The vizier's son, hearing this, thanked the treasury keeper's daughter profusely and quickly ran to the prince. He told him the whole story. The prince was overjoyed and immediately informed the king about the solution. The king praised the vizier's son for his cleverness and assured him that he would arrange his marriage with the treasury keeper's daughter after consulting with the king of the land. In the evening, the people entered the court with great calm and sat in their respective places. Shortly afterward, the princess stepped out and asked the prince, "Are you ready to fulfill the condition, or do you wish to return?" The prince smiled and responded. The wise princess said, "I don't want to return alone. I want to take you with me, and I'm ready to fulfill your condition." The princess gave the command to bring the lion's cage. After a short while, the cage was brought in, and inside it stood a lion that appeared to be alive. It seemed like a real lion was inside the cage. The artisans had crafted the wax lion so skillfully that it was almost impossible to tell it was fake. All the courtiers were amazed, wondering how the prince would remove the lion without opening or breaking the cage. The prince stood up and examined the cage carefully, then stared at the lion for a long time. After a while, he commanded that a large iron rod be brought and heated with a strong fire. The command was carried out, and the fire was set. The prince placed the iron rod in the fire, and everyone watched in confusion, not understanding what he was doing. As an hour passed, the prince, after an hour, picked up the heated iron rod and thrust it into the wax lion's stomach inside the cage. As soon as the hot metal touched the wax, it began to melt. In just a short while, the wax started flowing out, and the lion was no longer in the cage. Seeing this, everyone cheered and applauded. The prince smiled and said, "O wise princess, I have removed the lion without opening or breaking the cage. Now, what is your condition?" The princess, blushing, walked inside, feeling a little shy. After a while, she returned and said, "O wise prince, you have won all the conditions." The marriage of the prince and the princess was celebrated with great grandeur. 4 days later, the prince asked the king of that land to arrange the wedding of his friend, the minister's son, with the daughter of the treasurer. The wedding of the minister's son was even more lavish than the prince's wedding. After the celebrations, the prince, the princess, the minister's son, and the treasurer's daughter returned to their homeland, along with all the courtiers. For several days, they continued to celebrate the weddings, distributing wealth to the poor and needy. A few days later, the king decided to make the prince his heir and appointed him as the new ruler. The prince, in turn, appointed his friend, the minister's son, as his chief minister. He also set a pension for the minister's father, ensuring his comfort. The royal family, now living in peace and prosperity, worked tirelessly for the welfare of their people, ensuring the happiness of the citizens and bringing prosperity to the kingdom. The story teaches us that wisdom, love, and honor are the most important elements in a person's life. These are the very things that make a person truly successful. Dear friends, if you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay connected with us for more interesting and heartwarming stories.